Hi, class. This is notes to Introduction to Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process that only plants do. It's basically how you get light energy, like from the sun, and you turn it into chemical energy. And that's going to be the energy in your food that you eat. You know, if you eat a bag of Doritos, that is chemical energy. And ultimately, that energy from that bag of Doritos came from the process of photosynthesis, okay, in which a plant, a corn plant, turned energy from the sun into chemical energy. And that chemical energy was turned into that bag of Doritos, and that bag of Doritos you are then going to eat, and you are going to be powered essentially by those Doritos and ultimately by that plant and by that sun, okay? So an autotroph is an organism that makes their own food, okay? So this would be something like a plant. This would be something like a tree, algae that you find in the ocean. They all make their own food, a lot of the times using light energy, okay, from the sun, okay? There's also certain types of bacteria that are going to be photosynthetic. For example, there is some bacteria that live in the ocean vents. Now, really deep down in the ocean, really light can't penetrate to the very deep depths of the ocean. Okay, so what actually has to happen is that these bacteria that live by the vents, what they do is they turn this energy in the vents or from the chemicals in the vents, and they do their own type of synthesis and use that chemical energy instead of energy from light for their energy, and they are a autotroph as well. How I also, these are sometimes called producers in ecology, as well as how I remember what an autotroph is that they automatically make their own food, okay? A heterotroph, this obtains energy from the foods that they eat. So, for example, this is a deer, a wolf, a mushroom. All right. Basically, this is like we are heterotrophs. All right. We have to eat other foods. We can't make our own foods. We have to consume another source of energy, and that is in the form of food. That cheeseburger or tacos that you ate for dinner last night, those are what you ate, and that is the energy that you use to power you, because you do spend a lot of energy. It requires a lot of energy to just even keep you alive and to keep you growing and just living. Your brain, that takes so much energy. All right, so Bambi or any animal really is going to be a heterotroph, as well as things that maybe you don't always think of, like a mushroom. Okay, so for example, a mushroom what it does is it breaks down already organic material, like you might see a mushroom growing on a log or something like that, and what it's doing is it's breaking down that log for energy. Okay, that thing was already there. It can't make its own energy. Same thing with like a worm. Okay, a worm is eating energy in the soil, all right, or it's eating particulates in the soil, and it's breaking that stuff down for energy. Okay, it is using a different source of energy. So hetero means different, so it's using a different source for energy. That's how I kind of remember it. So autotrophs automatically make their own food, and heterotrophs have to get their food from somebody else or from something else. Another really important concept to understand, we kind of talked about this briefly before, is adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. It's pretty cool stuff. Okay. Also, ADP. It's an uncharged cousin. All right. But what it is that this is an adenosine molecule. This is an adenosine molecule. That's not really the important stuff. The important thing are these three little P's. Okay. These are phosphates. All right. That's right. That's what that P stands for at the end of ADP and ATP stands for. These are little phosphate groups. Okay. ATP, T stands for tri, or three, so that's three phosphates. Di stands for two, so that's two phosphates. Okay. What you can do is you can ATP, I call it the charged battery. It is a battery that is fully charged. It has energy in each of these bonds, and that is how it kind of does work. Whenever you break off one of these phosphates, that releases energy, and the cell can utilize that energy to do its processes, okay? This is the fully charged battery's ATP, okay? But guess what happens? If you expend this energy, you break off this phosphate, guess what? You have to charge that battery somehow. And how you do that is you take a ADP, which has two phosphates, and another phosphate that just got broken off, and then you add some energy to it, okay? And when we talk about photosynthesis, one of the things that it does is it charges ADP, is it turns ADP, which is a partially charged battery, it's kind of like a battery that's half juiced, to a fully charged battery, which is ATP. ATP is our fully charged battery. Okay, this is how the cell does work. It's how it's kind of the currency that the cell uses to power all sorts of cellular activities. Okay, but just to recap, diphosphate, two phosphates, and another phosphate, plus some energy, and then you get ATP. Okay, this stuff, that's not super important. Really worry about the phosphates. ATP is fully charged battery. ADP is not charged. It's partially charged. Okay? Really important. We're going to talk a little bit about the chloroplast. What the chloroplast is, do you guys remember talking about this with the cell, right? You kind of have two membranes, right? And then you have this inner substance. This inner substance is like cytosol, just this aqueous, just this gel-like substance, and that's called the stroma. Okay, just the liquidy stuff in the middle of the chloroplast. And then you also have these little green pancake things, okay? These are called thylakoids. Each of these pancakes is called a thylakoid, and when you have a big stack of the thylakoids, these are how they're arranged in the chloroplast. That's called a granum. So, a thylakoid is a sac-like photosynthetic membrane, so it's a little sac-like thing in the chloroplast. So whenever you hear a membrane, it means a phospholipid bilayer, and I'll kind of show you what this means tomorrow. But it's surrounded by a phospholipid bilayer, and there's going to be some proteins here, okay? And they're organized in the stacks called grana. So if you have multiple stacks, it's called grana. If it's just one stack, it's called a granum. Basically means the same thing. Grana is just the plural form. And these stacks, these pancakes, are where the light-dependent reactions take place of photosynthesis. There's two big reactions to photosynthesis. The light-dependent reactions, and then we'll also talk about the light-independent reactions. Basically, they're not dependent on light, or the Calvin cycle. I'll talk about that in the next slide. But all of this happens in the chloroplast. Also, if you remember from the cell, human cells don't have chloroplasts, right? And that's because we don't do photosynthesis, right? Chloroplast is where photosynthesis happens. Photosynthesis happens right here, folks. Stroma, this is the space outside the thylakoid membranes, and it's basically in between the thylakoid membranes and this inner layer, okay? This is just this gel-like substance, all right? Now, this is not a boring substance. There's a lot of really important reactions that are happening here, namely the Calvin cycle, or some books will call it the light-independent reactions, or the dark reactions of photosynthesis, because they don't just happen in the dark, but they don't need light to occur, okay? And we'll talk about a little bit more about what this means later on, okay? But this is where the Calvin cycle happens, is in the stroma. So, what is photosynthesis? I kind of talked about it before. This is the process where plants and other autotrophs use the energy of sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high-energy carbohydrates and oxygen as your waste product, okay? You don't really have to balance an equation. This isn't chemistry, so these sixes, right, don't worry about them too much. But just carbon dioxide and water and light, it's kind of our, that's where the energy comes from, or catalyst kind of, that's going to create sugars like glucose or carbohydrates and oxygen. Oxygen is kind of be your waste product, okay? But, so, you need light, you need water, and you need carbon dioxide. These are your ingredients. And then sugars is really what you're getting, as well as oxygen. Now, keep in mind, plants, what they do is they build things with carbohydrates, okay? If you look at like a plant, it is primarily made of carbohydrates. That is kind of their building blocks, okay? It's a very stable molecule, right? You look at a piece of wood, you can knock on it, right? It's solid, and that's because that's carbohydrates. That's kind of holding that thing together. Okay, it's a very sturdy substance, and it's also a substance that we as animals can use as fuel. Okay? But what's happening is that this light energy is basically going into the bonds in the sugar. So this light energy is being transferred from like the light that comes from the sun into the bonds that hold this sugar molecule together. So that's where your transfer of energy is happening. Okay? If you look at the other molecules, like the carbon comes from the carbon dioxide, hydrogen comes from the water, right? And then you have a lot of oxygen. Some of it's used as a byproduct, okay? The equation balances out. But this is a really important equation to know, and you will have to know it, okay? Very important. Oxygen is a waste product, but we don't think it's a waste as animals. We need it. It's pretty actually important. We call it a waste product because the plant doesn't really need all this oxygen, okay? It doesn't need it all. So, but it produces it. Light. Light, this is how plants capture energy of sunlight. This, like, if you talk about white light, okay, this is a mixture of different wavelengths of light, okay? So, if you ever talk about, like, electromagnetic spectrum, basically you have different wavelengths of light. Okay, you get radio waves, microwaves, that's how you make your burritos in the middle of the night. You got infrared radiation, so this is like a lot of snakes can see in the infrared. Or if you see like infrared cameras, like people glow up, maybe like firefighters might use it when they're looking at a building, because humans will blow up, they'll not blow up, but they'll like appear red. You can see them. Visible light is the small wavelength of light that we can see. UV, X-rays, gamma rays, cosmic rays. All right, X-rays is kind of what you use to see bones, and then UV comes from the sun, and that's kind of what gives you like cancer, and that's what like sunscreen protects you from. And we'll talk more about that. But all this is basically different wavelengths. Basically, how long is the wave? Radio waves are going to be the longest. Cosmic rays are going to be the shortest. Longer the wave, or the shorter the wave, the more energy in that wave. The visible light is primarily what we see. It's from 750 nanometers to 380 nanometers, okay? This isn't super long, okay? White light is all of the light that you can see. It is just a mixture. It's a blend of all these wavelengths of light, okay? When you talk about like dark, like a white t-shirt, the reason that it appears white is because it reflects all this light off your shirt. If you wear a dark shirt, that means your shirt, like a black shirt, that shirt absorbs all of that light, okay? So it absorbs all of that light, okay? So, So pigments and chlorophyll. Pigments, these are light gathering molecules that absorb the sun's energy, okay? So a plant needs to absorb energy from the sun, right? That's how it gets its energy, right? So what it does is that plants actually do a pretty poor job of absorbing green light, actually. They're really good at absorbing blue light and red light. If you look at this is the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, this is the electromagnetic spectrum. This is from 750 to 380. Okay, really good at absorbing blue light and red light, but not very good at all at absorbing green light. okay? And that's because that plant is reflecting all that green light off of its surface, and it appears to us as green because that's the light that it's not absorbing, it's reflecting off. It's absorbing that blue light, it's absorbing that red light, okay? The plant's main pigment that it uses is something called chlorophyll. Now there's two types of chlorophyll. You have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. There's a few other types of pigments like carotenoids, xanthophylls, stuff like that. But these are going to primarily give the plant its color. And when you look at like a plant, like a leaf, for example, specifically like a leaf, the leaf is the thing that's doing the photosynthesis. Like the bark of a tree really isn't doing any photosynthesis. All right, it's just kind of there to transport water. It doesn't appear green because it's not doing photosynthesis. And it's this chlorophyll that's capturing that sunlight from the sun and turning it into chemical energy. That's what gives plants its green color and its leaves. And like certain stems of some plants are going to be green, and that's because they do a little bit of photosynthesis too. It just kind of depends on the plant. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about plants later in the year. But chlorophyll is what gives plants its green color. Interesting thing about carotenoids. Carotenoids are, you don't have to know this for the test, but a carotenoid is what gives a lot of plants their red or orangish colors. So if you look at a tomato, it appears red. That's the carotenoids that are in there. If you look at like in the fall, the leaves outside are going to start dying. Like its chlorophyll are going to start fading away. And it's that carotenoids that are left in the plant that are going to give those leaves its brown or orange or red color. So kind of like shades of rust. So also it gives lobster shells its color too. This right here is what you need to know. This is basically photosynthesis in a nutshell. Okay, this is photosynthesis in a nutshell. Okay, so this is your chloroplast, right? This is your chloroplast. What happens is that light comes in, and this powers the light reactions. Okay, this powers the light reactions. Okay, water enters the light reactions. That's kind of the main source. And what happens is that this happens in the thylakoid, right, as you can kind of see. But this produces oxygen as a byproduct. And then what you do is you take these things called ADP and NADP plus. These are our uncharged batteries. Remember talking about ATP? It's an uncharged battery. NADP plus is an uncharged battery too. These are our uncharged batteries. And what we're going to do is we're going to charge these batteries using light to form ATP, which is a fully charged battery. Woot woot. I love ATP. And NADPH, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's another fully charged battery. Okay? That's going to go to the Calvin cycle, which is the dark reactions that's happening in the stroma, in which carbon dioxide comes in to using the power of our fully charged batteries to make sugars. Okay? Or glucose, or starch, or sucrose, whatever. This makes sugar. Okay? So, 2 steps. Light reaction, Calvin cycle. Light reactions in the thylakoids, Calvin cycle in the stroma. Okay? And you're looking at what things it needs. Like, Calvin cycle needs carbon dioxide. Light reaction needs water. Okay? It just depends. Okay? But this is what you really need to know. This is what you'll actually have to know for your quiz. Okay? So what I want you to do is, I'll probably draw another picture of this. I might draw a picture of this on Classroom. But I want you to draw this picture in your notes, okay? Because this is what your quiz is going to look like on Friday. You will have to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this picture, but I'm going to blank out light. I'm going to blank out H2O. I'm going to blank out carbon dioxide, okay, Calvin cycle. And you're going to have to fill in the blanks, okay? And that is all your quiz. You won't get a word bank, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 terms or so. Okay? So that is your quiz on Friday. So draw this in your notes. Draw it nice and big. I'll check your notes tomorrow. So anyway, that's all I got for today. See you tomorrow.